I hate to say that life gets in the way, but it's the reality, right? So it's, learning how to even delegate to have some sort of assistant at some point to help you with some of your life outside of work stuff during the day, so it doesn't get in your way to be successful anyway. But I'm I'm interested in your thoughts on that and where you're going.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Your time is the most important thing you have. Well, maybe not the most important. Your health is just as important as how you spend your time and your relationships. So there's a lot of things that are just as important as time. But today we're going to talk about optimizing your time. This series is something I'm really proud of. It's a very different approach to creating content for founders, CEOs of fast growth companies. My name is Gene Hammett. I work as an executive coach to the founders and CEOs from the Inc. 5000 and other companies that want to grow fast. They want to create leadership and culture that is world-class, and this is what I do. Today we're going to talk about optimizing your time with Chris Anderson. He's a founder, CEO of Ledge Loungers. They're on the Inc. list. They're growing fast through COVID because a lot of people are trying to find how do they spend their time at home around their pools. And so their business has really taken an upswing of late. What we talk about today is two things. The first is the one strategy that he's done that has made the most difference for him, which is better one-on-one conversations with his executive team. And we structure the details behind that. We look at, the agenda. Who brings the agenda? Does the employee bring it, or does the CEO bring it for the conversation? Well, we answer that question inside here, and it's something we've talked about a lot across other interviews. We also look at some of the other elements inside of how you structure that to make the most of that time, and that is a really interesting conversation for you. The second thing we talk about is a struggle that he is looking at. How does he create more space to be the visionary inside of his business? And so it's a coaching moment where we talk about some of the key elements of being the visionary in your business. And we talk about some of the key things that you can do to help him along that journey. One of them is firing himself. The other one is being intentional about how to schedule this time. And so a lot of the things inside this episode will help you be a stronger leader, but it'll also help you be a more visionary leader. If you want to talk about what's next for you and talk about your specific business, then I would love for you to reach out and talk to me. Just go to genehammett.com and find Start Your Journey. That is all about you becoming a better leader, about you becoming the visionary of your company, and I can help you do that. We'll get on the phone, we'll talk, we'll create a plan for you. If you like the plan, you'll run with the plan yourself, or you can have me help you with the plan. I'm happy to do it either way, but I want you to get the plan that you need to focus on so that you can be the visionary that your team deserves. Now, here's the interview with Chris. Hey, Chris, how are you?
I'm doing great. How have you been?
I am fantastic. Glad to have you back on the show. Join us for a special series on Optimize Your Time.
Well, we're excited to be back. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I got this idea because I have a lot of my clients as an executive coach that really want to create more time for themselves so that they can actually be the leaders that their team needs. And I know everyone's in a different place in that journey. So I kind of want to just give you a chance to give us some context around the company first, but that's what we're here to talk about today. Ready?
Absolutely. I appreciate that.
So tell me about Ledge Loungers so that we can understand what you do and why your business has been so strong through the COVID times.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were founded the company back in 2011. I think the short and sweet is we develop outdoor furniture. Most of it, we're kind of specialized in the furniture made to go in the swimming pool. We have constantly doubled the business year over year. Obviously, that continues to get harder. COVID actually has had a very positive impact on our business. People are wanting to get outdoors. In fact, the whole industry, outdoor furniture as a whole, has just gone through the roof. Our business virtually doubled this year after doubling for many years and then doubling this year. It was a big impact on our business, and it was more important than ever to do exactly what it is we're here to talk about today, which is learn how to delegate and learn how to manage a team so that I can focus on what the future is for the business and not get caught up in the day-to-day activity.
And just to put that in context, you went from 30-ish employees to over 100. What are those exact numbers?
We did. We had about 38 in March, and I think we're hovering right around the 100 mark right now. And we plan on having about 15 more by March so that we're prepared for next season. So our employee count is almost 3x, and our revenue again is almost 2x what it was last year.
Well, let's dive into it. When I ask you this big question around what's your number one strategy that's, created the time and space for you to be the leader, you talked about it's one-on-one meetings, but really better one-on-one meetings. Tell us a little bit about your one-on-one meetings.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think as we've continued to grow, and as I've had to round out my executive staff or my management team for the company, when I first brought on the managers, it's almost like I was not confident enough to let them go do their job. So I would go assist them or help them or work on something alongside of them, and then we'd compare our results. As well as there's just the constant interruptions during the day where once you bring on people and you're working on something else and they need to check in with you, they interrupt you, you focus on something else, and then you forgot what you were working on, and then vice versa. I don't think a lot of leaders think about the fact that you do that to your team just as much as they do that to you. So you're constantly barging in their office, expecting them to stop what they're doing and talk to you, versus a very structured weekly meeting. We call it a one-to-one meeting here. And basically what I do is I have my executive team meet with me one day a week, and it's their responsibility to generate and develop the agenda for the meeting. Now, of course, I want to point out, we still have our executive staff meetings. And in our executive staff meetings, we certainly review a scorecard. We look at all of our rocks, what we've accomplished, what percentage completion they are, and we really drive them forward week to week. But I really don't get into the nitty gritty, which each one of my executive staff members in those team meetings. We wait until the one-to-ones.
So I want to take you back to what it was like before. You were probably still having one-on-one meetings. Was it just a little bit less structured?
Absolutely. And let me explain why. So obviously when you're growing a business, you're busy. You're 1 minute you're working on a legal issue, the next minute you're working on an accounting issue, the next minute you're working with a sales customer situation, right? You're one of the only people within an organization that has to be on all these different topics all the time. So if I had a Thursday meeting with, for example, my product development director, I put so much pressure on myself to have, what are we going to talk about? What's the agenda going to be able to have an agenda for him when he walks in the meeting, to have a guideline to what he's going to follow. Sometimes it's important, obviously, to get them the agenda before the meeting so that they're prepared for what you want to talk to them about. But what I've found is by truly turning it back on them, and I've got some great advice on this, but by turning it back on them and saying, you come with the agenda, because they know what it is they need from you to go be successful. And it's my job as the founder or president of the company to provide them the resources they need to be successful. What I've found is when they bring the agenda, about 90% of the time when we get through their agenda, we've covered all the topics that I wanted to cover that day. And so it's them bringing it and discussing. Now, occasionally there'll be a topic that I have in mind that they don't bring up. But again, a large portion of the time, it's topics that they bring up that I was intending to talk to them about anyway.
Chris, I want to ask you a question that kind of gets to the heart of this. When you were bringing the agenda to it, it's almost like you're telling them, I want you to pay attention to these things. But when they're bringing the agenda now, they're telling you what they're paying attention to. Is there more of a sense of ownership because they're bringing the agenda now?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they feel like I'm not micromanaging them. Like they have the autonomy to go be successful, and they're driving their success. You certainly bring up a great point, because there's quite a few times where they bring something up, and I ask them, why are you even focused on that? That based on the current priorities, why are you spending time on that? You're wasting your time. Like that is not a priority. So we certainly readjust priorities based on what it is that they think is important. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, without a doubt, they're bringing it. They feel more autonomous. They feel like they're in control, and we all know, right people, right seat, right? You'll quickly learn if the person that's doing the job is capable of doing the job, or if you're just carrying them along. I think too many times we have people in roles and they shouldn't be in that role, and we carry them along, and we end up doing 90% of the work and they do 10% of the work, or we do 60% of the work and they do 40. You really need to find executive leaders within your organization that you can rely on to carry that torch and then you're just there to help them occasionally versus you carrying it. And that's what this has done. It's really shown some clear examples of where some of our leaders aren't successful, and I can really focus on helping them in those areas versus the stuff they're good at. I don't want to get in their way.
I picked up on something you were saying there, and I just want to make sure we put a spotlight on it. When you were talking about these one-on-one conversations, they're bringing the agenda. You're asking a lot of questions, which is really working on your coaching skills so you can actually help them through the questions versus telling them what to do. Is that fair to say, or did I just read that into it?
No, that's critical, because when I was taught this process from some other business advisors, if you will, they told me, if I am talking more than 20 to 30% of this meeting, it's not a successful meeting. The other comment was, listen to listen, don't listen to respond. I think a lot of times we will listen to somebody, and after they say the first 5 to 10 words, you already have your response ready to go, and you're just waiting for them to stop talking so you can tell them what you want to tell them. The best thing to do is stop listening to respond and just listen to listen. Let them get from the beginning to the end of whatever it is that they want to talk about prior to interrupting them or prior to breaking it up. Let them get it all out. And then you're going to have a better response or a better answer to what it is we're discussing, because you actually listened to what they were saying. I was doing a lot of that in the early days, as I was listening to respond and not listening to listen. Additionally, again, like I mentioned, if I'm talking more than 30% of this meeting, then we're not succeeding. I need to keep my mouth shut and listen, ask questions, let them continue with the topics just based on some questions. A lot of the time, you're teaching your leadership team how to solve their own problems, and they don't even realize that you're doing it. You realize you're doing it because you're not talking the whole time, but they talk through it and they solve their own problems, and then it's their idea, and they're going to run off and be much more successful at it than if you were to go tell them to do it.
I'm glad you added those details. And I want to switch gears here a little bit, because as great as that strategy is, there's always a next level that we have to evolve into as leaders. And you had talked about one area that you really were working on now. What did you share with me the other day when we talked about this?
Specifically, being the visionary of a company, I believe is what you're referring to.
Yeah.
I've got to work on my business and not in my business, or else my business will stop growing. There is only so much residual success that my business has in it that is going to be success based on prior achievements and prior things we've done. And if I'm not driving it forward, that is residual success is going to run out. I've got to go see the thing that's going to go develop or create the thing that's going to make us more successful towards the future, as opposed to just focus on why we're successful today. And to me, that is what a visionary does. Is a visionary focuses on what's next for the business. Not only what's next. Let me back up just a hair. How can we do things differently that we're doing today to be even better? But then additional, what else can we be doing to be successful? So typically when you're working in it, you're not focused on how to make it better. You're focused on just fulfilling the order or communication with your customer or this or that. You got to focus on making the existing business better and focusing on what's going to continue to allow us grow beyond making the current business better.
So I appreciate you giving us the context to what the issue is. And it sounds like you have a really solid understanding of why it's so important. But because this is a coaching session and you've given me permission to kind of coach you through this,
Sure.
We're going to go deeper than just what we know is important. So when you think about being a visionary leader, what gets in the way?
Well, man, I mean, everything from, again, the daily things that are the daily pop-up stuff that you have to handle because maybe you're not confident somebody else on your team can handle it, all the way, I hate to say that life gets in the way, but it's the reality, right? So it's, learning how to even delegate to have some sort of assistant at some point to help you with some of your life outside of work stuff during the day, so it doesn't get in your way to be successful in the day. But I'm interested in your thoughts on that and where you're going.
I hear a lot of different things. You're not giving me anything new, but it sounds like you are still stuck in a lot of the day-to-day.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly getting to the point where I have confidence in my leadership team, and I've been able to focus on KPI on a weekly basis versus get in the middle of their business during the week. So structuring our executive staff meetings to more of a scorecard, reporting on your tasks, reporting on your rocks, versus just getting in a meeting and talking about what's going on in their world today. That's our old exec staff meeting, right? Hey, tell me what's going on in marketing today. Tell me what's going on in operations today. And then everybody in the room would listen. Now they're much more structured, again, to goals, percentage complete, scorecard, that sort of thing. So that's helped significantly. And of course, there's other things we're focusing on, which is, filling out the team. Making sure that we have, I've really been focused on making sure that we have all the gaps filled and understanding at what point we're going to need more people. Usually you haven't identified you're going to need another person until you get to it. But we're also focused now on that future planning structure as well.
Chris, when you think about one of your roles there, I'm going to ask you a question that, I never know what you're going to say to these questions, but
sure.
You ever thought about the need to fire yourself from certain things that you're doing so that you don't have to keep going back to them and fixing the problems?
Absolutely. There's two ways you do that, right? You fire yourself because because you're giving somebody else a chance to handle it, and you're not sure how they're going to handle it. So you're going to hand it over to them and hope they learn, and they might make a mistake. You got to be okay with that, but they're going to learn from that mistake. And if they show improvement, they're doing a good job. Or go find somebody that has the experience and can do it. Typically, the second one there is quite a bit more expensive.
Yep.
And not a lot of growing businesses have the capital to do it. But I'm very eager and interested in what the next thing you're going to say is, because I think you can give some advice.
When I'm walking clients through this process, typically we would have to get down on paper exactly the things that they know that they need to fire themselves from, by looking at their calendar and being able to say, you know what, I really shouldn't be at this meeting anymore. This team has got that thing, whatever it is. They've got their scorecards, they've got their processes. I need to be updated, but I don't need to be there for that weekly meeting. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And I can give you some very clear examples of, right now we're working on building a new office building, a new facility, a new office. It's not a building. We're just building out a space, and we're developing a showroom. We're developing the office space, and we're doing everything from picking out desks to office chairs to paint colors to tile on the floor, because it's a new experience for me. It's something that I want to be involved in. So I'm meeting with all the contractors. I'm trying to figure out, how they all overlap and get quotes and pricing and all this stuff. And I quickly realized I am spending a majority of my day focusing on planning an office. And if I don't get somebody else to help me and put a lead on this, then what else am I going to be dropping, right? What am I not going to be focusing on that I need to be focused? So this is an example where we identified somebody on the team that had some project management skills, and now they're the lead on it. They come to me with the questions and I help solve them, but they're the lead on it. It's something so badly that I want to do, because it's fun. It's the next cool thing. It's, it's like the hamster, getting distracted by something. I want to do it because it's fun, but I can't really be ultimately responsible for any one thing other than, my executive staff team. And I've got to let them do it, and I've got to delegate to them without.
One of the things I'm hearing in there is early on in this process, you were getting caught up into the emotion of it because it's something fun to do. It's something you want to be a part of, but it probably isn't the highest value for your time. Like you realize that. The bigger picture here is that's a good example, but there's others that are already going on right now that you haven't let go of yet. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
I'm not going to dive into the specific ones, but that's a part of the process when I'm coaching with someone, is to identify where they can fire themselves. Yep. And I know it's a weird term to fire yourself, but that is the key. I want to kind of switch gears here a little bit. Do you have any more questions about this concept of firing yourself?
I'm going to be more attentive to it. I think you certainly have got me intrigued to really, one thing I commonly will do is write down on a list of all the things I do in a week, and then prioritize them and look at the things on the bottom of the list and see how I can cross them off. So
let me give you a little detail behind that before we move on.
Sure.
And really this is about putting together kind of a matrix, if you will, because when you identify the project or task that you need to fire yourself from, and I don't know what one of those in your example is, but you identify 3, 4, 5, maybe it's 10 of them. And the exercise is, who is the person that would do this if you weren't available? And you write down a name. I'm not asking you to do anything, but you would write down a name next to that slot. And then in the third column on this matrix, if you will, I want you to jot down why you think that person is the right person for that job. Like, what is their mindset, or what is their skill set? What what is the reason why that would be the person? If you were not able to attend these meetings, for example, you had to take a medical leave of absence, you would have someone else doing that for you, right?
Absolutely.
And it's forcing you to write down the areas that you want to fire yourself, who is the person that would step up in that role, and then why it is. And then you just prioritize from there, because some of those are really easy. And actually the easier ones are easy, oh, I know there's usually something that's already on the top of your mind. I'm kind of curious, is there anything on the top of your mind that you should fire yourself from?
Well, I think let's talk about for a second. I totally appreciate where you're going, but like, let's look at the quote unquote psychology behind it, right? It's We're afraid as leaders to let somebody else go do something because we don't know how they're going to treat it. Like, we don't know if they're going to make it the best it can be, whereas we know we will make it the best it can be. But over the period of growing this company, we've had to put leaders, middle management in place, executive level management in place, and we have to be confident that they're going to go treat it like it's their baby. They're going to go treat it and make it as absolute best it can be. I made the comment earlier to one of my, actually my partner in the business. I said, we have to give our leaders rope, but we don't want we don't want that rope to get too long, because then if something happens, it's going to be so much harder to correct.
Yep.
Right. So I think there's a process of a little bit at a time, to the point where you get really comfortable with somebody's skill set and they've gained an understanding of how you expect it to be done within your organization.
Let me give you an example of this with one of my clients. And this is a guy Mike, I was working with over the last few years. When I first started talking to him, he knew that he was the bottleneck to a company that was growing, to 10 million. And I said, well, how would you tell you're the bottleneck? And he goes, I can tell you right now, there's a stack of reports on my desk that I have to review that no one else on the team can review, because they're expecting me to approve these so they can go to clients. And I go, how long does it take to do those reports? He goes, it's about 2 to 3 hours each report. I said, how many are there? He goes, let me count them. There were 14. And I said, that's half your time. He goes, yep, I spend half my time reviewing the work of my team. And I said, I'm just kind of curious. Who would you pick on the team to do that if you couldn't do it? He immediately picked 2 names. He immediately said, I think they could even be better at it than me, even though I've got 30 years experience. And he goes, but he hasn't given it up because he's emotionally attached. He's just used to doing it. It's comfortable. They need him. It feels good. But what eventually happened was we put people in place. We put the right people in the right seats, as you said, and no longer is he the person reviewing those reports. And in fact, he only gets the special exceptions now. And so a year later, or maybe 9 months later, completely different experience, because half of his week is now allocated to being the visionary of his business. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone has different little things. Most of the time, they're not that big. That's very glaring, big area where if you fix that area, you can move on to something else at a higher value. And what you have to understand is there's always areas where you have to be able to let go, find the right person, whether they're on staff now, maybe it's an outside contractor, maybe it's someone else that you have to hire. But your job is to not always hold on just because you do it the best, but to find people and coach them to the place where they can truly rise up to the occasion. And you spend your time coaching them and supporting them until you realize they own it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think there's an accountability factor too, right? I mean, if he was doing those reports and it was 2 hours each and it was 14 hours and he's got a lot of distractions, he might not do them as perfectly as they need to be done. Whereas then he can hold somebody accountable and require them to do it perfect, because it is their job and it's potentially a large portion of their job. As we're talking, it's very clear to me. One thing I did this morning was I approved some terms for some customers. And looking at the process that I go through to approve those terms, it's relatively simple. What are their credit references? Do they pay quickly, and do they not have a large overdue balance? And if so, I give them the terms that they're requesting. There's no reason why my accountant shouldn't be doing that. But for some reason, I want to hold on to the control of that, because I don't want a whole lot of businesses owing us a lot of money. But that is a really good example of where you've helped me realize, like, hey, get rid of that task. I don't need to do it.
Here's part of that will help you do this. And I've just seen this with many clients, is a lot of times we do these things just like you talked about, because we haven't set up the boundaries and guidelines that would allow other people to do it. it is a formula, or there is a boundary at which, you might say, well, $1 million deal, I still want to kind of be involved. Like, you got to let me know on a certain threshold, but when it's below some number, look, please don't bother me.
Yep.
And so I give you that. I want to switch gears just a little bit here, Chris, because I've asked this question before, and I think it's a pretty interesting question, is if you're not the visionary of the business, if you're not spending as much time as you can to look for the new opportunities and to see where you need to innovate and create new products, if you're not doing it, who is?
Well, I mean, the reality is nobody. I don't want to say nobody. I mean, we have a product development team, and they're certainly going to focus on that, but they're more focused on executing what's in front of them. They're more focused on developing the products that they've been asked to go develop and take to market. In time, I realize that I will not be able to always be the one deciding on what our next products are, right? So identifying the gaps, and this goes back to the last conversation we just had, identifying the gaps that are within the organization of all the things that I do on the daily basis, even as the visionary. Right now, I'm really focused on what's the next trend, what's the next cool thing. We should have somebody within our organization that's doing that, that's thinking through, hey, what should our next products be? So I don't think you ever stop delegating. I think as you continue to focus on being a visionary more and more and more, you even start delegating some of that visionary stuff.
I totally agree with you. And it comes with you being able to let go of what you currently have, creating space to think, creating space to let your mind wander about the future and around the corner. And a lot of times we're just not very intentional about it. I will kind of lead us through this last piece here. If you want to be a visionary, do you believe that it just happens, or do you believe you're intentional about that?
Oh, you certainly have to be intentional. I think there's inspiration that just happens, but you have to intentionally focus on that inspiration.
A lot of famous people out there do this differently. Bill Gates is famous for going away for a week and reading books that are completely outside the realm of, when he was at Microsoft. But he did this religiously because he wanted to take the time away from the day-to-day, look around the corners, take his head up and say, where's the world going? And where are we as a company positioned to get there? And so if you believe in being intentional and you want to be a visionary, one of the things I would urge you to do is think about, when are you creating visionary time? And when are you putting that and scheduling it? And it could look like, for some people, it's a little bit each day. For some people, it's big blocks in a certain week or 2 or 3 hours. And for others, it's once a quarter, I'm going to go on a solo vacation for myself, and I'm going to spend 2 days thinking about our business. Absolutely. And I'm not asking you to pick which one it is, but that's what it kind of looks like, that kind of intentionality around being the visionary that the company needs.
Yeah, and I add to that, it's, we actually require our executive staff we call them clarity breaks. We require all of our executive staff to take that time and go do something where it's, they can shut everything off, whether it's an hour, whether it's 2 hours, whether it's 4 hours, or whether it's a weekend. And then what we do is we ask them in the executive staff meeting after they've returned to share what they came up with, what they thought about. And it kind of helps everybody else want to go hit that clarity break. So absolutely.
I love that. The same thing, if you came to me and saying, I just want to be a little bit more visionary and get out of the day-to-day. So these are some of the things that you have to think about is, letting go. And I know there's some emotional components to everything that you're holding on to. Either you can do it better, you don't have someone else on staff that that you trust enough to pull in. But here's the thing, eventually you'll find someone. And what I'm asking you to do as we wrap up this segment is to think about the things that are more in the near term and get rid of as much of those as you can, and empower your people. And all those one-on-one meetings that you've been really good at, encourage your team members to do the same thing with their staff. And this is something that you can do, and that will create space for you to be the visionary leader, as long as you don't, fill it up with other things that are kind of pulling you in different directions.
Yeah, great thoughts. I appreciate that, Gene.
Chris, thanks you for being here. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.
Well, this wraps up another incredible conversation with a founder who has their finger on the pulse of what does it take to grow a company. You've seen the examples of Chris. We've talked about some of the things. And one of the things I want to leave you with this today is, if you are in the day-to-day so much that if you saw an opportunity and you didn't have time to react to it or even consider it, Are you truly the visionary for your company? And this truly hit me yesterday when I was thinking about why is it so hard for people to take time away from the business and the day-to-day to think about what's coming. It's not happening very well or very much if you're not doing it. So you should be the one that's very intentional about it. This wraps up another great episode of the Growth Think Tank podcast. If you want to be a visionary leader, make sure you check out some of the free resources. Keep listening to the show. And when you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.